This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, let's start. Yeah, hope it's audible to everyone. Okay, right. So in the last class, we have started with what function models. We have created a couple of function models. One function model is without parameters. Another function model is what with parameters. And we understood that all the function modules, all the function modules are stored inside what a function group. Okay. So we require one function group in order to create a function module. So this is a different server. So let me create a function group once again. What was the function group I created earlier? It is a different server. Okay. So I'll create the function group first. So I'll go to Object Navigator SEAT. So in this Object Navigator, from the drop down, I'll choose function group. I'll give the name of the function group. Let me give the name as something Z645 F group. Z645 F group. Press enter. Okay, so when you press enter, it is saying that function group does not exist. Create the object. Yes. Provide some description. I'll save it in the local object. Right, so every time we need not create the function group. Once a function group is available, I can store any number of what function modules. So since this is a different server, I am creating the function group once again. The name of the function group is something Z645F group. Right, function group is created, and as usual, once a function group is created, two include programs gets created. One is top include program, another is UXX. Okay. As of now, top include program is blank. When I double click on this, it is an empty include program, right? So this is an empty include program, and even UXX is also what? It's an empty include program. This include is reserved for what? SAP. So before I start using the function group, let me activate the function group. So right click on this, activate the function group. Right, function group is what? Activated. Now we need to create the function. One is Z645 what? FM1, which doesn't have any parameters. Another function model is it contains what? Two import parameters. Two import parameters. Okay. Based on that import parameters, I am doing some calculation and displaying that. Okay. Now let me create a new function module. So where do we create the function model? Function builder, SC37. I'll go to SC37. Provide the name of the function module. I'll give it as Z645 FM2. Z645 FM2. I'll click on create. It is asking for the function group. Let me give the name of the function group as Z645 F group, which we have created just now. Okay, and short text. I'll just give some description like function module returning what? Values. Returning values. Save it. It is reserved for SAP means I cannot create one more function model with the same name. Once a function model is created, it is available throughout this particular SAP server. So it is unique. Continue. So in the last class, I created one function module with how many two import parameters. In the import section, I declared two import parameters of type integer, and as part of the function model definition, I declared one local variable. We are performing the sum of those two numbers and displaying that. Within the function model, I'm displaying that. Now my requirement is this function model should read two input values. It should accept two should accept two input values of type integer. It has to perform the sum of those two values and also the difference of those two values, and it has to return that sum and what difference. Understood? So in the last example, we are not returning any values from the function model. Means in the last example, we don't have any export parameters. What is the purpose of export parameters? They are used for what? Returning the values. We are only importing in the last example. Now I want to import two integers as well as I want to export two integers. One parameter should contain sum, another parameter should contain what? Difference. So if you take other programming languages like C, C++, a function can return only one value. Okay, a function can return exactly one value, and that is done by using what? Return keywords. Okay, but whereas in ABAP, a function model can return any number of what? Values. Okay, so it depends how many values we can return, means any number of values. It depends upon what? Number of export parameters. So what is the requirement now? This function model should read two parameters and it should return what? Sum of the two parameters as well as the difference of the two parameters. Okay, so let me create that. Oh, fm2 is already created, so let me give it as fm3. Okay, so I'll just go back. I'll just delete this function model because FM2 already we created in the last class in a different server. Let me follow the sequence. So let me delete this function module. I'm trying to delete that. Delete the function module S. Then it is deleted. Let me create new one. So Z645 FM3 create function group. What is the function group? Z645F group. Then here I'll just give some description, some short text, save it. Reserved for SAP. Done. So by default, this is what type of function model? Normal function model. Normal function model. In the earlier example, I used a different server, EHP7 with ANA database. At that time, it was showing it as regular function model. Regular function model and normal function both are what? Same. Done. So in the import section, I'll pass two parameters. In general, import parameters will start with what? I underscore. So I'll say I underscore x. Okay. Then here we have type and type ref2. As I told in the last class, type ref2 we have to use when you're referring to a class or when you're referring to an interface. So that comes under object oriented. So for the timing, I'll go for type and associated type. What kind of data type? Integer, character, all those things. I'll go for what? Integer. Then I'll say I underscore y, I underscore y, type what? I underscore y, type I. Done. Yeah. Do you want to rename? Yes, rename. Right. I underscore x type I and I underscore y type I. Done. And you can see here by default parameters are passed by what? Reference. If you don't select the checkbox, they are passed by reference. And you can see one more column here, optional checkbox is there. If you don't select these checkboxes, it means what? They are what? Obligatory. They are mandatory. Compulsory you have to pass the values. Done. Then so these are two import parameters. Then what is the requirement? It has to return me the sum of these two parameters as well as the difference of the two parameters. So whatever you want to return from the function module, that you have to specify under what? Export section. So I'll go to export tab. Okay. Here I'll give the export parameter name as something e underscore r1. Generally export parameters will start with e. E underscore r1 type what? I and then I'll take another parameter e underscore r2 type what I. Okay, e underscore r1 type I and e underscore r2 type I. So you can observe here in the import tab we have the column called as optional. By using this checkbox we can mark whether the parameter is optional or what obligatory. If you don't select this, it means what they are what obligatory, compulsorily we have to pass the values for these two parameters at the time of calling the function model. But if you see the export section, we don't have any column called as optional column. So which means what, export parameters are always optional. If you take if you take C++, return parameters compulsorily we have to receive. Means in C++, if a function is returning any value, compulsorily we have to receive that value at the time of calling that particular function. But whereas in ABAP, export parameters are always optional. If you are interested, we can import, otherwise we can ignore. So understanding is they are always what, optional. Done. So this is my signature. It has got two import parameters of type integer, both are mandatory, and we have two export parameters R1 and what, R2. Then how do we define the function model? Function and end function. Where you have to do that in the source code tab. I'll go to the source code pad. This is the signature of my function model. By default, they're passed by reference. Then what I have to do in the earlier example, to store the calculated value, I declared one local variable within the function. Any variable, if you declare within a block, we call it as what? Local variable. Here I did not declare anything because already I declared what? Export parameters, which is going to hold the result. So I'll say e underscore r1, e underscore r1 is equal to I underscore x plus I underscore y. Then e underscore r2 is equal to I underscore x minus I underscore y. So this is my business logic of my function model. If you take C++ or Java, if a function or method has to return the value, we have to use a return keyword. But here, since these two parameters are export parameters, they are considered what, return values. How many values you are returning here? More than one value. But in other programming language, we can return exactly only one value. Here I can return any number of values. Done. Let me save it. Check for the syntax error. Activate this. Done. I can test the function model here only. So already we know at the time of calling the function model, import becomes what? Export, and export becomes import, reverse. So when I execute this, done. So what is the import parameter values you want to pass? I'll give something 88 and something what, 11, 88 and 11. I'll click on execute button. Yes, I got the return values through this export parameters 99 and what, 77. So my function model is working fine. Done. Now let us try to call this function model from our executable program. Any questions so far? Okay, right. So now let me try to call it from the executable program. So I'll create an executable program. Right. So I'll go to SC38. I'll give the name of the program as Z645 program 32 because last one is what, 31. So I'll give 32. Done. Type of program is executable program. I'll save it in the local objects. Done. So what is my requirement now? We need to call the function model. Before calling any function model, we have to check the what signature of the function model. Okay, we have to check the signature of the function module. So if you see the import tab, we have two parameters of type integer, both are what mandatory. So while calling the function model, import becomes what export. So how many values you have to export? Two values of type what integer. So since you have to export two values when you're calling, let me read it from the user. So also parameters something p underscore x type I, and I'll take another parameter p underscore y type I. Understood? So I took two parameters of type what integer. Done. And what else this function model is going to export two parameters of type what integer. Export parameters are always what optional. If we are interested we can import, otherwise we can ignore. So I am interested to import it. What values it is returning? Integer. So since it is returning integer, I require two integer variables to receive the result. So I'll say data something gv underscore r1 type I some name, and I'll take another variable gv underscore r2 type I. Done. So let us call the function module using the pattern so that the signature is automatically generated. So import becomes export and export becomes what? Import. So I'll go to pattern. I'll give the name of the function module as something Z645 FM2. Z645 FM2, sorry, FM3. This is the name of the function model. Okay, continue. So you can see here import has become export, and import has become export, and export has become what? Importing. And you can see here this I underscore x and I underscore y are not commented because by default these two parameters are what? Obligatory. So compulsorily you have to export the values. So I'll say I underscore x is equal to p underscore x and I underscore y equal to p underscore y. And you can see here both these parameters are commented because export parameters are always what? Optional. If you are interested we can receive, otherwise we can ignore. So as of now I want to import it. So what I'll do, I'll uncomment this or I'll ignore it for the time being. Okay, done. That's it. So I'm just passing, but I'm not importing the return values. Now let me say write what sum is gv underscore r1 and the difference is gv underscore r2. Let me save it, check for the syntax, done, activate. Okay, so when I execute this, I'll give the values here 77 and 11. Right, I'm not getting any values because I have not imported that. So I got the default values of integer. By default is what? 0. So if I debug now, see this, I'm passing some values. So when I execute, I'm calling the function model. We have read the input values in what? P underscore x and p underscore y. When you're calling the function model, control goes to definition. So this p underscore x and p underscore y will be exported, which will be imported in what? I underscore x and I underscore y. So when I say fi, control is going to the definition of the function model. So you can see p underscore x is imported in I underscore x and p underscore y is imported in what? I underscore y. Then we are doing some calculations. E underscore R1 is 121, E underscore R2 is 33. The control is coming out of the function model, but while calling we are not importing this values. That's why I got what? Zeros. So what is the understanding? Export parameters are always what? Optional. Let me try to call once again. Now this time I'll say I'll call the function model once again. What is the function model? FM3. This time I imported to I'm interested to import the exported value. So I'll say p underscore x and this is p underscore y, and in the importing I'll uncomment this. I'll say what? gv underscore r1 and gv underscore what? r2. So I'm importing the values. Let me execute this. So how do we read this? We are calling the function model fm3 by exporting p underscore x and p underscore y, which gets imported in what? I underscore x and I underscore y. Then the function model exports two parameters e underscore r1 and e underscore r2, which gets imported in our program variables r1 and what r2 I am displaying. Okay, so don't read this separately. If you read this separately, understanding that we are assigning this gv underscore r1 to e underscore r1. Don't read, this is not a separate statement, it is a part of the syntax. So how do we read it? We are calling the function model fm3 by exporting what, two parameters, by exporting two parameters p underscore x and p underscore y, which gets imported in I underscore x and I underscore y. Then the function model exports two parameters e underscore r1 and e underscore r2, which we are importing in gv underscore r1 and gv underscore r2. So when I execute this, right, so this time I'm receiving the values. Okay, now let me call it once again. I'll clear that variables gv underscore r1 and what, gv underscore r2. I'll call the function model once again. What is that? Z645 FM3. This time I'll pass the values p underscore x and p underscore y. And this time I will import only one parameter. What is that? gv underscore r1. It is my wish. I am not importing what? E underscore r2. Because export parameters are always what? Optional. So out of two export parameters, I am importing only one parameter. So when I print it now, I got 0, 0, 110 and 22 and then 110 and what? 0. Understood? So the overall understanding is export parameters are always optional. In some cases you may import, in some cases you may ignore. Okay, so this is the way to return the values from the function model. Any questions, please ask me. I'll just give some message for your understanding. Case 1, return value is not imported. Case 2, what is this? Return values imported. And here let me say case 3, specific return values imported. Means out of two return values, I am importing only what? One value. That's what I want to say. Okay, done. So this is about import and what? Export. Import means those are the parameters passed to the function model. Export means those are the parameters returned by the function model. And you can see in the import section, both the parameters are what? Obligatory. So if you don't pass, it will give what? Runtime error. Suppose in the first case, I'm calling the function model, but I'm not exporting one of the mandatory importing parameters. So when I execute this, see now, I'm reading the value, but I'm not passing. So I got the runtime error. I got the runtime error. What is the runtime error? Incorrect parameter with what? Call function. When calling a function model, one of the parameters was not specified. Okay, and the exception has occurred in detail. What is that? When calling the function model fm3, one of the parameters needed according to the interface description was not specified. This parameter was what? I underscore x. So now what I'll do in order to avoid this runtime error, wantedly let me make I underscore x as optional. Okay, so since I made the changes to my function model, let me reactivate this. Then it is reactivated. So it is what? Optional. Na? So one of the import parameters is optional, means you may or may not pass the value. So when I'm calling it for the first time, I'm not passing. Second time I'm passing. It's my wish. So earlier we got the runtime error, but this time we'll not get any runtime error because we are not because it is marked as what? Optional, so that you may or may not pass the values. And I'm not receiving the values here. Okay, that's the meaning. Suppose here also, for the second case also, I will not pass. It is my wish. So when I execute that, I am reading, but I am not passing. So what I got here, 0, 0, 11 and 11 minus. Why? If you don't pass the value for the integer, by default it takes what? 0. So 0 minus 11 is what? Minus 11. So I got what? 11 minus. Already we know how to remove this negative symbol from the right hand side. That anyhow we can do. So what is the understanding? Since it is marked as optional, you may or may not pass the value. If you don't pass the value, it will take it as what? Default value. What is the default for integer? 0. Suppose what I'll do, I'll give something 99. Okay. So what is the meaning? If you don't pass the value, it will take it as what? 99. Okay. So let me check it now. In the first two cases, I'm not passing the values. So when I execute, I'll read 66 and 11. Okay, so in the first two cases, I'm not passing. So it takes what? Default value. What is the default value I gave for that parameter? 99. So you can see a first case, anyhow, we are not importing. So you can see 99 plus 11 and 99 minus what? 99 minus 11, which is 88. In the third case, I am passing the value. In the third case, I am passing the value. What is the value? 66. So it is taking what? 66 only. If you don't pass only, it will take what? Default value. Hope it's clear to everyone. Any questions? Please ask me. Okay, done. Now let us understand the purpose of a changing parameter. Okay, so import means they are the parameters passed to the function model. Export means they are the parameters returned by the function model. Changing parameter means it will act as both import and what? Export. Changing parameter will act as both import and what? Export. Same parameter I can use for passing the value as well as for holding the return value. Same parameter I can use for passing the value as well as holding the return value. So let me create a function model now. So same kind of requirement. What is my requirement? I want to create a function model which has to accept two input values as import parameters. I have to find the sum of that. I have to do the sum of those two parameters and return that particular sum. So in general, how do we do it? You'll take two import parameters and you'll take one export parameter. That is a general thing. You'll take two import parameters and one export parameter for returning the value. But now I want to what? Use a changing parameter. So changing means what? It will act as both import and what? Export. So see the change here. FM4, I'll give a function group Z645F group. Short text, I'll give something function model with changing parameters. Done. I'll save it. Result for SAP. Okay. In the attributes, what is this? It is a normal function model. I'll go to import. Yeah. What is the signature I want? It has to read two input values and return the sum of those two input values. So I'll say parameter I underscore x type what? I. So I need to pass two values. I need to pass two input values. So I have to take two import parameters. But instead of taking two input parameters, I'll directly go to changing and I'll say something c underscore y type what? I. Means this parameter I can use both for import and what? Export. This variable I can use it for both the purpose. Now I'll go to the source code, right? So I'll say c underscore y is equal to I underscore x plus c underscore y. Same variable, same parameter I'm using it for calculation as well as for storing the result. So this will, at the time of calculating, it will import the value. Then after executing the function model, it will return the value, whatever the current value is there. Let me save it, check for the syntax, activate this. Done. Let me test it here only. So you can see this C underscore Y will act as both import and what? Export. So here I'll say 66, I'll say this is 22. So I'm trying to call the function model. I'm trying to execute the function model. So 66 and 22 will be passed. We are doing the calculation and it stores the result in what? Same variable. So when I execute, in the same variable, I got the result as what? 88. So understood. If you want the same variable for passing the input as well as for holding the return value, we can go for what? Changing parameter. Okay. Now let me call it from the executable program. So somewhere here, yeah, I'll just give a message. Calling the function model FM4. So blindly we should not call the function model. Before calling the function model, we need to check the signature of the function model. What is the signature of my function model? It has got one import parameter of type integer and it is mandatory. And it has got one changing parameter of type integer. It is also what? Mandatory. So changing will act as what? Both import and what? Export. So at the time of calling, I must pass the value for this parameter as well as I must pass the value for what? C underscore y. So both the parameters values I have to pass. So let me try to use the pattern. So already we know at the time of calling import becomes export and export becomes import. Now changing will remain what? Changing. So see now Z640 FM4, see what happens. Import has become export. So I'll say P underscore Y and changing you can see it remains as changing only, right? So how do you read it now? We are calling the function model FM4 by exporting two parameters P underscore X and P underscore Y. It will perform the calculate, return the value which are importing in the same variable what? P underscore Y. So see now, right? Sum is, so this is also something for understanding. Changing parameter is what? P underscore Y. So at the time of calling, we are passing the value and we are returning the value. We are returning the value to the same variable. So when I execute, I'll give 66 and something 11. What I got? 77. Same variable. We are using it for passing as well as returning. So if you debug here, okay, 66 and 11 done. So if you see P underscore X is what? 66. P underscore Y is what? 11. So at the time of calling the function model, we are exporting P underscore Y. What value we are exporting? 11. So these two values will be imported in what? I underscore X and C underscore Y. Since this is a changing parameter, it will export it back after doing the calculation. Again, we are importing in what? P underscore Y. So when I say F5, done, it is received in I underscore X, it is received in what? C underscore Y. So at the time of calculation, C underscore Y is what? 11. I am doing the calculation stored in the same variable what? C underscore Y. So when I say F5, C underscore Y now is what? 77. It will be returned. We are receiving that in what? P underscore Y. So when I say F5, yes, it is received back in what? Same variable 77. That's all. So when do we go for export and when do we go for changing means export will go when you want to return the value to a separate variable. Changing if you want the same variable for carrying the imported value as well as for holding the exported value, we'll go for a changing parameter. Right? So any questions, please ask me. Okay, right. Done. So we understood about import, export, and changing. Tables, nothing but they are the internal tables. Whatever you specify under tables, they are nothing but what? Internal tables. Just like in subroutines also, whenever you are dealing with the internal tables as parameters to subroutines, we were using the keyword what? Tables keyword. Okay. Here also, to deal with what? Internal tables as parameters to function model, we have to specify that in what? Table section. But whatever we specify here, whatever the type we specify here, this type should be available in the database. Okay, so at this stage we don't know how to create the objects in the database. Okay, so in the next concepts, when we discuss dictionary objects, we'll see how to refer to the table. So for the time being, I cannot cover tables, because whatever you are referring here, it should refer to the database objects. At that time, we don't know how to create database structures, we don't know how to create database tables, all those things. Okay, so just leave these tables for the time being. We'll discuss that as and when we discuss what dictionary objects and other concepts. So don't worry about this at this stage, leave it. Okay, then simple understanding is here. Let me try to create, I'll create a new function model, or let me create here only. Suppose in the tables I'll say something t underscore emp type. Here I need to refer to the dictionary type. I need to refer to the dictionary type, means I need to refer to dictionary structure, or I need to refer to dictionary table. Okay, so I'll give something kn1. So at this stage, we don't know what is this kn1, or we don't know how to create our own structures in the database. So just leave it for the time being. Just leave it for the time being. So let me remove this. I'm removing it. Save it, check for syntax, activate this. Now let us go for what? Exceptions. I'll take a very simple example to understand what exceptions. Leave the tables for a few days. Done. Now let us try to understand the other tab called as what? Exceptions. I'll create a simple example here. FM5 Z645F group. Type of program is what? Save it. Done. So my requirement is a very simple concept. I want to pass two integers as parameters and return the division of those two numbers. I have to pass two input values and I have to return the division of those two numbers. So how do we do it? In the function module, in the import tab, I'll give the parameter name I underscore x type I. Let it be mandatory. Then I underscore y type I. Again, let it be mandatory. What I have to do, I have to return the value. So I'll go to what? Export. In the export, I'll say e underscore z type what? I. E underscore z type I. We have two import parameters of type integer which are obligatory by default, and one export parameter of type integer which is always optional. Then I'll go to source code. Here I'll say e underscore z is equal to I underscore x by I underscore y. Done. That's it. Let me save it, check for the syntax, activate this. Okay, done. So let me try to test it here only. When I execute, I'll give something seven, sorry, I'll give something 77 and I'll give something 12. So 77 by 12 is something 6-point chain. So when I execute, I got what? 6. It will round off to the nearest integer. So I got the result as what? 6. Then I'll give 77 and 0. So we are trying to divide the number with what? 0. In any programming language, if you divide with 0, it leads to what? Runtime error. So when I try to execute this, yes, I got the runtime error. Something, one exception class is there here. At this stage, again, we don't know what is exception class. Leave it. But I got a runtime error. Why I got the runtime error? Because you're trying to divide the number with what? 0. In programming language, if you try to divide any number with 0, it leads to runtime error. So the reason for the exception means runtime error. In the current program, an arithmetic operation attempted to use operands of type integer to divide by what? 0. So which statement is giving me the runtime error? When I scroll down in the function module, here we have one statement. This statement execution only is leading to what? runtime error is leading to runtime error. So when it is leading to runtime error, whenever I gave what? 0. Whenever I gave 0. So what I'll do now, just observe here. I'll go back to my function model. So I'm getting one exception. I'm getting some runtime error. I'm getting some runtime error during what program? During my function model execution. So now I'll go to exceptions tab. I'll go to exceptions tab. Here I have to give the exception name. So we don't know much about exception classes at this stage. When we come to object oriented, we'll understand what is exception handling, all those things. For the time being, just we're trying to understand the exceptions tab. In the exceptions tab, we can declare the exceptions. I can declare standard exceptions. I can declare user defined exceptions. But again, we don't know anything about exception. So I'll just give the name of the exception as my exception. You can give any name. I am giving the name as what? My exception. I can give ABC. I can give PQR. Done. So the name of the exception is my exception. I'll go to the source code now. Here I'll say if what? If the second parameter is equal to what? 0. So I'm using the conditional statement. If the second parameter is equal to 0, I will say raise what? My exception. I am telling SAP that if the second parameter is equal to 0, you raise the exception. Else means what? If the second parameter is not 0, you try to divide the number with what? The second parameter, and if. That is the change I am doing. What is the change I did? In the exceptions tab, I declared my user defined exception. Some name you can give. ABC, PQR, XYZ element, something. I gave the name as my exception. Then in the source code, I am raising the exception whenever the second parameter is what? 0. Done. Let me save it. Check for the syntax error. Activate this. Done. So when I execute, let me test it here only. I'll give 77 and something 13. When I execute, I got what? 6. 5 point change. It is rounding up to the nearest integer. I gave what? 0. I'll give 0. Okay, what happened here? I am not getting the runtime error. You understood? The agenda of exception handling is what? To avoid the runtime error. So when I give 0 also, I am not getting any runtime error. We are handling that particular situation. We are handling that particular situation. Now let me try to call it from my executable program. So here in the same program I'll do it. Yeah, here uline calling the function model Z645 FM5. Done. So what is the signature of the function model? Two import parameters, both are what? Mandatory. Both are mandatory. And one export parameter of type what? Integer. Any export parameters are always optional, and one user defined exception, my exception. So I want to receive that exported value. So I'll just say clear. Already I declared some two variables, R1 and R2 of type integer. Let me make use of R1. So before using, I'm just clearing that. Now let me call the function model. What is the signature? It has got two import parameters, one export parameter and one user defined exception. So I'll go to pattern. I'll give the name of the function model as Z645FM5. Z645FM5. 5 only, or 4. 5. Okay. Z645FM5. So import becomes export. Export becomes import. And we also have exceptions. So see what happened when I continue. See the signature here. This is the signature now. Okay. I underscore x is equal to p underscore x, and this is p underscore y. I'm interested to import. I'll import that value inside my variable gv underscore r1, and you can see here it has generated a separate sections called as what? Exceptions, because I declared what? My own exception. So in the exceptions, what is our exception name? My exception equal to 1. So what is the meaning of that? It seems that if our exception is raised, it is going to set the size of RC value to what? 1. Already we know the size of RC system field. It will store the execution status of what? ABAP statements, previous ABAP statement. Okay. So what is the understanding now? If our exception is raised, it is going to set the size of RC value to 1. If some other exception is raised, it is indicated by what? Others keyword. It is going to set the size of RC value to what? 2. So it is proposing the values as 1 and 2. I need not stick to 1, 2, 3 sequence. I can give any value. Suppose I'll give 88. I'll give this as something 55. So what is the meaning? If our exception is raised, SAP will set the size of RC value to what? 88. If some other exception is raised, SAP will set the size of RC value to what? 55. If no exception is raised, size of RC remains what? 0. But the general tendency is we'll give 1, 2 kind of thing. So I'll give 1 and 2. I'll follow the SAP standard. Then I'll remove all this in if block. Now I'll write my own condition. What is that? If size of bars is equal to what? 0 means if my function model is successfully executed. On successful execution, size of bars will remain what? 0 means I may get the division where I'll receive the division in the variable what? gv underscore r1. So if size of bars is equal to 0, I'll say right what? Division is what? gv underscore what? r1. Done. Else if size of ours is equal to what? 1 means if our exception is raised. When our exception will be raised? Whenever the second parameter is equal to 0, SAP is going to raise our exception. Whenever our exception is raised, SAP is going to set the size of ours value to what? 1. So if size of ours is equal to 1, I'll give a message saying what? Cannot divide by what? 0. Cannot divide by 0. Done. Else if size of bars is equal to 2 means if other than your exception, if some other exception is raised, it is indicated by using what keyword? Others. If size of bars is equal to 0, I'll give the message as what? Unknown error. Done. End if. End if for if is what? End if. Understood? So how do we understand this? If our function model is successfully executed without any exceptions, size of RC remains what? 0. If our exception is raised, SAP will set the size of RC value to 1. If some other exception is raised, it is indicated by what? Others keyword. At that time, it is going to set the size of RC value to what? 2. So when I execute this, save it, check for the syntax. When I execute, yeah, I'll use 66 and something 19. So what happened? You are not giving 0. You are not giving a second parameter value as 0. So if condition is failed, it will do the calculation. So our function model will be successfully executed. So 66 by what? 19. Something 3-point change. It will round off to what? Division is what? 1. Hmm? Why I got 1? 66 and 12. Division is 1. Why 1 was? Why I got 1? Okay, let me put the breakpoint. 66 and 11. Done. So P underscore X is 66, P underscore Y is 77. But I gave what? Ah, oh, I'm sorry, boss. I'm sorry. The problem is in the previous case, I'm using this P underscore as changing now. So the previous value of P underscore is what? That one. That's the reason. That's the reason. So I'll do one thing. I'll do one thing. Let me take another value here. I'll give something After reading the value, immediately after reading the value, I will assign this value. What is that? GV underscore y equal to P underscore y. So that even if P underscore y is changed, it will not reflect what GV underscore y. So what I'll do here, instead of passing P underscore y, I'll say GV underscore y. Okay, let me execute this. So when I execute, right, so I got what? Division is what? 6, because it is what? 5-point chain. I got the nearest value. Okay, now I'll give 0. So what happened? If I'm trying to divide the number with 0, what happens? It will raise our exception. Whenever our exception is, already we have instructed SAP to set the size of RC value to what? 1. So when I execute now, what happened? Cannot divide by 0, because it is setting the size of RC value to what? 1. So if you debug, so here if I debug this, I'll give something what, 78 and 19. When I execute, you can see now what you are passing now. P underscore x is 78, GV underscore y is 99. Control goes here. Okay. I underscore y is what now? 19. I underscore is what? 19. So what happened? Exception will not be raised. Control goes to else block. We are doing the calculation. Okay, size of RC remains what? 0. Size of RC remains 0 because no exception is raised. So I received the value inside what? GV underscore R1. I got the result as division is what? 4. Suppose I'll give 0. Suppose I'll give 0. So see now, when I'm calling, what is the second parameter? I pass 0. So before raising the exception, what was the size sub RC value? 0. Before raising the exception, size sub RC value was 0. So when I say F5, I'm about to raise the exception. So whenever our exception is raised, in the program already we instructed SAP to set the size sub RC value to what? 1. So see now when I say F5, done. Size of RC value is what? 1. Control is coming out of the function module. It is coming back to the calling program. What is the value of size of RC now? 1. It goes to else if size of RC equal to 1. I'll get the message what? Cannot divide by 0. So that is the purpose of what? Exceptions tab in the function builder. What I can do in the exceptions tab, I can declare our own exception, or I can declare the standard exception, and at the appropriate place you have to raise the exception. At the appropriate place you have to raise the exception, and at the time of calling the function model, we need to instruct SAP if our exception is raised, what is the size of RC value you want to set. If some other exception is raised, it is indicated by what? Others keyword. At that time it will set the size of RC value to what? 2. Okay, and I have to check the size of RC status and print the appropriate value. That's it. That is about import, export, changing exceptions, and what? Source code. Tables we'll discuss after a few days once we understand about database objects. So any questions, please ask. Right? Right, so we are done with the modulation techniques. Tomorrow onwards, tomorrow is what, Saturday, na? Yes, tomorrow I'll not take the class. Tomorrow I'll not take the class. The next class will be again on what? Monday. We'll have the next class on Monday, and on Monday onwards we'll start with the new concept. Okay, either we'll start with the dictionary objects, or we'll start with database programming. I'll decide accordingly on Monday. So Monday onwards, we'll start with a new topic at 6:30. Done? I'll wind off for today if you don't have any questions.